Hey K-popers, and welcome back to Hallyu. This week we're talking about the boy group that made me stop being a 100% girl group biased K-pop fan, Monsta X. We'll start by seeing how these boys started out really strong right from their debut and how they leveled up their game to become a premier boy group in K-pop. Next, we'll look at their foray into English music and how it pushed them even further into superstardom, and finally talk about how these boys simply just do not quit. Before we get started, I want to quickly thank Hallyu's honorary producers. If you want to show off your bias group here, share your pics in weekly videos, and join a vibrant Discord community with watch parties, custom emoji, and more, all you need to do is support Hallyu on Patreon. Now, if you didn't know, Monsta X was actually formed out of a survival show back at the end of 2014 called No Mercy. The show featured 13 contestants actually when IM joined, who worked with fellow Starship Entertainment artists who were also acting as judges, like Hyolyn, K-Will, MadClown, and others. At the end of the show, the top 7 members were chosen to debut in Monsta X, those being Shonu, Wonho, Minhyuk, Kihyun, Hyungwon, Juhan, and IM. And in case you're wondering why the name Monsta X, well, the Monsta has 2 meanings. The first being that they are monsters conquering the K-pop scene, and the second being that Monsta is a combination of the French word mon, which means my, and star. This is also seen in their fandom name of course too, which is mon bébé, meaning my baby in French. So on May 14th, 2015, it was finally time for this brand new group to debut, and they did so with the EP Trespass and a debut song by the same name. With their debut, we immediately got to know what Monsta X is all about, a strong and edgy group of bad boys with EDM and hip-hop influenced sounds. The boys really suited this concept, and it should be no surprise because even though it was their debut, Juhan, IM, Kihyun, and Wonho all contributed to the lyrics, rap sections, and composition of most songs on this debut EP. Just a couple of months later, the boys were back with the EP Rush, which cemented that style while also adding some frivolous pining after a pretty girl to lighten the mood. And something else that was obvious right away was the really strong dance skills in this group, something that was definitely on display at KCON 2015, where as rookies they brought down the house in Los Angeles. It was becoming obvious in a hurry that Monsta X were the real deal, and when they released their next EP with the cinematic MV for All In, their EP debuted at number 5 on the Billboard World Albums chart. They also announced their first concert around this time, a 2-night affair which sold out in 5 minutes flat. Oh, and let's not forget that little known Y-Teen collab with Cosmic Girls and that song Do Better. To round out an incredibly successful 2016, the boys had one more EP with the lead single Fighter, which featured a Stranger Things inspired MV. Now at this point, Monsta X could have been content with their lot in the K-pop world as a popular boy group, but instead they kept pushing, and 2017 ended up being a landmark year for them as they truly exploded onto the global scene. Not only were they spreading out by getting their own show on JTBC2 called Monsta X-Ray, but they became regular chart toppers on the World Albums chart with a #1 debut for their first studio album The Clan Part 2.5, The Final Chapter. And when you're having that much success, you may as well expand to Japan too, right? Well, Monsta X's debut Japanese single album cracked the top 3 across the board in Japanese charting, including the Oricon Singles Chart, Tower Records, and the Billboard Hot 100 Japan chart. Not long after that, of course, was the start to their first world tour, where they brought their trademark badass image and incredible talent to North America, South America, Europe, and Asia across 16 different stops. And yet, with all that success and 3 100,000 seller albums under their belt already, they had somehow never won a single music show. I'm sure you guys know where this is going. With the release of the EP Code and its lead single Drama Rama, the boys attended the November 14th, 2017 episode of the show. And as the winner is announced, the crowd absolutely loses it as the boys are finally rewarded for their continued excellence.
Monsta X 축하드립니다! 네, 베스트 초이스 몬스타 X 소감 들어볼게요.
처음으로
So with that first win down, what was next for the superstar group? Well, how about carrying the Olympic torch? No, I'm not joking. Monsta X were official torchbearers for the first day of the sole leg of the torch relay for the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympics. And throughout the year, they just did not slow down. Whether it was their Connect Deja Vu EP, their countless partnerships with companies like Lenstown or Moncler Fashion, their many Japanese releases like Puzzle, and their Japanese tour. Oh, and they rounded out the year by becoming the first Korean group to ever perform at iHeartRadio's annual Jingle Ball tour. Now again, at this point, Monsta X could have looked back at their amazing success, the name they made for themselves around the world, and been pretty happy with things. But instead, they continued to grow and add even more to their long list of strengths as a group. A couple of big ones that stand out to me are 1, their ability to create beautiful ballads alongside their regular image and badass songs, and 2, as we'll see going forward, their foray into English music. This really took off in 2019. We had Jooheon changing his stage name for English songs to Joohoney, the group's Play It Cool collab with Steve Aoki, and the deal they made with Epic Records to distribute English music outside of Korea, starting with the song Who Do You Love? And yet, the boys never neglected any one part of the fanbase because they were still making great Korean music like the EP Follow Find You, which sold over 250,000 copies. In countless other deep dives of certain groups like Rainbow, I've talked about how hard it can be to balance Korean and Japanese sales, and yet Monsta X were doing it while also making great English music. Now unfortunately, there was a bit of a mess on Halloween because Starship announced they'd be parting ways with Wonho amidst some rumors swirling regarding unpaid debts to acquaintances of his. As much as this was really sad news to hear as Monsta X fans, thankfully in time Wonho was cleared of his allegations, and as we know, he actually rejoined a Starship sub-label as a soloist in 2020. So just how big had Monsta X really gotten at this point? Well, on Valentine's Day 2020, the group dropped their first all-English album and it debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Not the World Albums chart, the Billboard 200. 6 weeks later, and they were topping charts in Japan as well with a new Japanese single called Wish on the Same Sky. And 2 months after that, they were back with an EP and title track Fantasia, which again sold over 250,000 copies in Korea. This is why I have so much respect for this boy group. They're so talented, and in the span of under 4 months they released English, Japanese, and Korean music that all destroyed their respective markets. And despite the effects of the pandemic halting their tour plans, they did not slow down making new music at all. Throughout 2021, they released 2 Korean EPs with a combined 800,000 in sales, a Japanese studio album, and an English studio album as well. So while members Shonu did enlist in the military service this past July, the group has absolutely no signs of slowing down. Well, what more is there to say about Monsta X? As I mentioned at the intro of the video, Monsta X was the boy group that turned this purely girl group biased K-pop fan into a more balanced one that actually enjoyed boy groups as well. And it was thanks to some absolutely spectacular music that started strong at their debut and has just constantly leveled up since then. Monsta X came out of the gate with a strong image of hip-hop and rap-inspired tracks, an incredibly high level of expertise when it comes to their choreography, and the involvement in their music to make sure their comebacks were authentic through and through. And then they proved they could deliver moving ballads with emotional vocals. And then they proved they could succeed in Japan with a chart-topping debut. And then they proved they could do that the world over with a global tour and increasingly high-charting English albums. I think you get the point. Monsta X is a boy group that can do it all and that has never stopped pushing the limits. It's the reason that Monsta X has sold millions of albums, it's the reason they're known as a premier boy group around the world, and for me, it's the reason I even enjoy boy groups in the first place. So thank you Monsta X, and you guys keep doing you. We'll all be here cheering you along every step of the way. Alright, that's the story of Monsta X so far. What's most impressive to you about their journey since they started in 2015? For me, I just simply cannot get over how successful they've been at balancing Korean, English, and Japanese music releases. As always, thank you so much for watching this deep dive, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss all the great K-pop content coming your way right here at Hallyu. This has been deep dive number 90, Monsta X.